Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it as many of our players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines, nor do not saw the air too much with your hand, thus, but use all gently. For in the torrent, tempest, and as I may say, whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance. That may give it smoothness. Oh, it offends me to the soul to see a robustious, periwig pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to split the ears of the groundlings, who for the most part are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. I would have such a fellow whipped for o'erdoing termagant. It out-Herod's headed. Pray you avoid it. Be not too tame neither, but let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action. With this special observance, that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so overdone is from the purpose of playing, whose end, both at the first and now, was and is, to hold as 'twere the mirror up to nature, to show virtue her feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time, his form and pressure. Now this overdone will come tardy off, though it make the unskilful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve, the censure of which one must in your allowance o'erweigh a whole theatre of others. Oh, there be players that I have seen play, and heard others praised, and that highly, not to speak it profanely, that having neither the accent of Christians, nor the gait of Christian pagan nor man, have so strutted and bellowed, that I have thought some of nature's journeymen had made men, and not made them well, they imitated humanity so abominably. And let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them. For there be of them that will themselves laugh to set on some quantity of barren spectators to laugh too, though in the meantime some necessary question of the play be then to be considered. That's villainous, and shows a most pitiful ambition in the fool that uses it. Go, make you ready. Hello. Welcome to the channel. Brian Jennings here, the Millennial Dragon. This channel exists to discuss my pathological relationship with Quentin Tarantino, who's in the process of shooting his film right now. There is no David Fincher, right? That he's been embroiled in a psychic siege with me, right? And now he's making the film because he knows he'll never compel me to suicide. And he hovers a dangerous, palpable evil over me constantly that he can always deny. He's destroyed the dignity of his soul. Right? Him and God, not on good terms. No. He's turned his back on the Almighty. Right? Right? He's taken golden idols. Right? So, I wrote Quentin a series of letters. Right? 4 letters in the month of June and July, around July the 4th of 2023, about playing the lead in the movie Critic. And that set into motion a sequence of events that led to where we are now, ultimately. Right? And so the substance of the novel that I've written, which is called Building a Coven, right, is a deconstruction and a novelization of my experiences on the psychic frontier with Quentin Tarantino. Right? If there was no validity in my claims at all, he would have never canceled the film. Right? And that's it. There's nothing else to say there. Right? I live in palpable fear constantly. He's a dangerous, evil man who mocks me by being evil because he knows that if I try to do the same things, he'll just hire someone to murder me, right? That he lives in this world of LA, fixer, horse shit, right? Where nothing is out of bounds, right? And so, right? Before I continue going, what I'll say is it's always nice when when a video of mine gets disliked. Right? But internet culture where everyone complains about anything, but they don't say what they didn't like about the video. And I know that my claims are broad, right? It ain't for everybody, right? But when you come to a level of understanding, right? Then if you accept the reality, right, that life is not an accident, then by default, there has to be the potential for clairvoyance and remote viewing and psychic phenomenon. Right? Is there the only question to ask here, right? The only question to ask here right? Is there such a thing as remote viewing, right? Like, is there such a thing as psychic phenomenon, right? Is there such a thing as telepathy, right? Is there such a thing as telekinesis? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Right? Definitively, right? This is not up for debate. And so that's the nature of our relationship. He gave me that little window of light, right? And I chose my side, and I hated myself over it for a long time, but I don't anymore. I don't anymore. Major point, right? Like, you think evil's cool, you think manipulation is cool. Like, I'm not interested in the things that he's interested in, right? I'm interested in compassion and love and tolerance and helping and giving, all these things. And he's interested in guile and cunning and control and all the things that I despise. Oh gosh, guess I'm not a Hollywood badass, right? So, right, the point is that I broke the spell, right? And the reason that it's a David Fincher film right now is because he's embroiled in a situation with me, right? And he can always deny it. That's like, right, that these are the games that he plays, like subtlety, like, gosh, right? The whole reason that he sold it on April Fool's Day is because I emailed, right, the CEO of his agency, William Morris Endeavor, at the time. He's not the CEO anymore. Or aemanuel, like 4 or 5 days prior. And I said that, do you understand what you're in the middle of? Right? So, we'll come back to that in due time. If you recall, devotees of the channel, all 5 of them, and I know I have 1,000 subscribers, but in this building, we're building something, like, please, like, share them, comment, like, all the things, subscribe, subscribe to the channel for sure. We're going through this book, Spherical Models, right? And this is the next form, matter of fact, the cover of the book, right? The truncated dodecahedron, right? And so truncation in geometry is a process of protracting each edge by 1/3. So the middle third is still there, right, in the middle, but on each vertex, right, you cut off 1/3 of each edge. And so, right, this was initially a dodecahedron, which was 12 pentagonal faces. And so, having truncated each of the edges, right, by 1/3, you now arrive at 2 polygons defining the structure of the sphere, right? The larger polygon is a series of 12 decagons, 10-sided polygons. What was 5 becomes 10, right? And so, right, there's 12 of those. And what was 20 vertexes, right? There's 20 vertexes because it's the dual of the icosahedron, right? And we'll come to that in just a second. Becomes 20 triangles, right? So it's 12 decagons and 20 triangles, right? And the dual of this, right, is the last one that I built, which is really, it's so beautiful, it's so graceful, is this one, right? 360 triangles, right? And it's a fine sphere. It's a fine sphere, right? And so, right, the truncated dodecahedron is also 360 triangles because they're duals of each other. An icosahedron has 20 triangular faces and 12 vertexes, right? A dodecahedron has 12 pentagonal faces and 20 vertexes. There, it's inverted, right? Right? That we arrive at duality by placing a vertex in the center of each face, right? So there's a face, right? A decagon, right? And here's another face, triangle, right? And if you connect all of those, right, you end up with this, right? 12 pentagons, 20 hexagons. Each edge in the spherical model is defined by 2 spherical triangles, right? If we take this big beautiful one, for example, and we say, okay, here's my hexagon, right? Like 1, 2, right? 2 triangles, right? Boom, 1 edge. And so there's 12, right? Each hexagon times 20, right? That's 240 plus 12 pentagons, right? which is 5 sides. So that's 2 triangles each side, which is 10, right? So 10 times 12 is 120. 240 plus 120 is 160. I've been working on the truncated dodecahedron, and I'll show my progress. Here's one example. I did all of the gluing, right? That there's roughly 70 or so arcs on here. Each of these is a spherical triangle for the decagonal faces. Right? And so I still have to do the smaller triangular faces, but I have more printing to do, so I'm going to do that tomorrow. It took me all day. There's 4 of these that are basically filled. There's at least 3. I think there's 4 that are filled all the way to arrive at 240. And then it's 120 of the smaller triangles of these, because each of these requires 6, right? Because it's a triangle, 3 sides to a triangle. Okay, so 6 times 20, right, is 120, right? And so 20 triangles per decagon, 10-sided decagon, times 12, right? 240. 240 plus 120 is 360. It's the same amount. So, right? Why do we do this? Right? Why do we go through this process? Right? All of life, right, is a physical simulation of a nobler spiritual truth. You can always say, oh, well, can't never know, right? And that's valid. I would say it's sad and hollow intellectually, but it means something, right? But if you say, right, that there's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will, then inevitably, right, you arrive at the necessity for Platonic forms, right? Plato's beautiful allegory of the cave, I believe it's in the Republic, right? Where he says that the life lived unphilosophic is as though chained inside of a cave. And everything that you see, right, is a projection cast onto the wall of the cave from an illuminated puppet out of view. And when you liberate your mind, right, when you break free of the chains enslaving you to the cave, and you come out of the cave and you see the real world, right, you see it for what it really is. When you come back down into the cave, right, to help your brethren, you say, oh no, this isn't the way, this isn't the truth, this isn't the life, right? They say, oh gosh, how unfortunate, he's lost his mind. Right? And this is still true now, right? It's a perfect allegory for intelligent design. And so, if you proscribe to the idea, right, and you don't have to be a Bible-thumping Christian, citing fire and brimstone, that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Right? Like if you, honestly, I touch on this in my novel, right? That I've been jealous of those types for a long time. That I had to get dragged kicking and screaming out of agnosticism, right? Through years of vigilance, right? Through years of study, right? Through years of discipline, to arrive at a logical likelihood, right? But all those hillbillies that live all around me, right? I'm in Alabama right now, right? They don't need a scientific. They go. The world's a beautiful place. Like obviously, it comes from something unknowable and divine, right? And that's fine. But if you say, oh, I wanna know, right? The first thing you have to acknowledge is that your ignorance can never be circumvented. He who names it shall never know it. Right? This is why, right? In the Kabbalah, right? It's an ineffable name, right? It's a name, right? That you could say Jehovah, right? You could say Yod-Heh-Vah, right? Like you could say these things, right? But it's a name, right? That to speak it degrades it, right? That's the point that they're making, right? And so you symbolize it, right? You put it in, right? Take this for example. Right? This is a fine sigil. that's, like, this is a meditation, right? And it's a little wide in place. Like, I could have written it better, you know? And just to fully deconstruct this so that we're all on the same page, right? That this is arrived at a very particular construction, right, which is discussed in a book that's underneath. I'll see if I can get it. One second. One second. I'll pause. Right? That this, right, stems from a specific page in this book, How the World is Made, Jean Michel, right? And so I'm not going to jump to the page right now, right? But the way that you construct it, right, is through making a square of 3 centimeters, right? So it's 3, 3, 3, 3, right? And then you make, from there, you make 2 right angle triangles, 3, 4, 5, right? Pythagorean triangles, right? On either side of the square, right? And so now you have an edge of size 11, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, right? And this is used, right, as the base edge length for a square, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And so if you cast a circle inside of the square, right, and then a smaller circle inside of the smaller square, right, and then you put this, the point of the compass right here and your pencil right there, right, that circle that it casts, right, is the same area as the square, right? It squares the circle. And this triangle, right here is the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, 51 degrees, right? Right? So that's the ineffable name of God inside of the Great Pyramid, right? And so I did it up and down, right? You don't have to do that at the bottom, but, right? Been known ancient times, right? But this is a proper expression of it, right? Because you don't have to say it, right? You look at it, right? And so I've touched on this before, right? That language is its own plasmatic vortex of intention, right? That language is a necessary noble divinity just as much as religion, if religion is necessary, right? I allege that it is, because man is a thinking creature. Man is a venerating creature, right? But if you say that life stems from something pure, true, and perfect, right? This comes back to Plato, right? Platonic forms, right? That what we see is a shadow, right, of its pure, idealized form, right? Right? So, inside, right, according to Pribram and Bum, right, that in terms of information in every cubic centimeter of space lies the potential for all of manifested reality, right? And this is the subject of Michael Talbot's masterwork, The Holographic Universe, right? And so I posit that abstractly, perfectly, right, ideally, right, that diffused within every cubic centimeter of space, right, is a twofold expression of the divinity, each equal and necessary, right? The first of which, right, is the scaffold, right, this subquantum superatomic, right, quantum manifold electric waveform of probability, right? And that exists as an infinite complex nesting of polyhedra. Here's an example. Right? And the second part of it, right, is the impetus for motion, right, which I refer to often as the divine light of deity, right? It is the kinetic action exerting pressure, right, that both of them exist diffused within each other, right, equally in terms of volumetric pressure, perpetually in a state of rest, right? God is stillness, right? Be still and know that I am God. It says be still more than anything else in the Bible, right? That God is not something within creation. It is the still fulcrum which supports creation, right? And so, eventually, the divine light of deity seeks to express its knowing, right? And exerts pressure, right, as motion upon the structural scaffold, right? And so, if we take this as an example, even though it's falling apart, right? Right, that if all of creation is embedded within this, right, that I could close this in a sphere, cast a circle around it, and call that a great circle, because it bisects the volume of the sphere, right? Each degree, 360 degrees around the great circle, is a potential vector of pressure upon the structural manifold, right? That all 360 degrees are their own potential vector of pressure upon the structural scaffold, right? So if it pushes down at the top, right, that's gonna engender one thing, right? Pushes in from the side, it's gonna engender another thing. You can have an infinite complex, right? And so the dihedral, right, the specific angle, the specific angel or angels, right, with which the divine light exerts its pressure upon the scaffold reflects what it materializes in the material world, like reflects what it engenders as matter in the material world. And so what's actually occurring is that as the divine light, right, puts pressure upon this structural manifold, it begins to collapse, right? And this is the philosophy, or something, the science of Buckminster Fuller and the vector equilibrium. That's what's at the inside of this, right, is the vector equilibrium, right? And so, right, the divine light of God exerts pressure upon the structural manifold, right, causing it to collapse, right? And as it collapses, it engenders electric resistance, grating as friction against itself, space grating on space, right? And so as it continues to collapse, right, that kinetic friction continues to increase the levels of electric resistance until, like static electricity, shocking you, it can no longer remain inert space and erupts, right, as a cosmic orgasm into matter. Each dihedral, right, each angle with which it imposes pressure, right, or pressures, right, angles, right, it's an infinite complex, right, reflects what we perceive as measurable matter, right? So, right, I posit, right, this is why we're going, this is why I have this book, right, this is why I made this, right, this is why I'm going through this book, right, this is why, right, I drew that, right, that there is a geometric scaffold, right, that resonates harmonically on all stratas, all convocations, all sizes, forever, right? And so when I take the time, right, to construct these things, right, that I am embedding within my psyche, right, the harmony of this form, right, which is a piece of the divine form that manifests all of life, right? And so when people say, bro, sacred geometry, yeah, flower of life, right? That's fine. Like I've talked about it before. If that's all you need to see, right? If you just need to see Metatron's cube, which is somewhere in this, right? If I put it on paper, right? Then that's fine, right? But that's only the first level, is what I'm saying, right? But these models, right? This is like real mathematical rigor, right? And so what I'm saying is that these are physical abstractions, right? That this is you can see a soccer ball which has the same design, right? But this is a physical representation of an abstraction, right? Of a piece of the divine quantum hologram, right? And so we're going through this, making every single model in here, right? Because it keeps me tapped into all of creation, right? And thereby, right, makes me a good psychic. I want to say other things, right? But, makes me a good clairvoyant, right? Because I'm tapped into the structural scaffold that resides in every cubic centimeter of space, right? That's the idea, right? And so, right, when you make things like this, right, like this is the guy I emailed, aemanuel, right? The Moloch at the top, that's just me being an asshole, right? Here's his wife, right? That this is another piece of the hologram, right? This is a division of 51, right? 17 equilateral triangles with the ineffable name, right? And so if I meditate on this, right, inevitably I end up at him, and I've never done this because, right, I'm plagued by psychic vampires, right? Right? But if I did, right, I'd find him as long as I'm still, right? Would it happen in an hour, right? Might take me a week, but it might take me an hour, right? Right? Anyone is allowed to say, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. But anyone who has a heart, right? Anyone who has any sort of spiritual bend, right? If they hear those things that I just said, it's really hard to argue them, right? And so, right, at the highest levels of the unfolding of the divine plan, sees the earth emerge. On his deathbed, Aristotle said, I regret removing the earth from its proper place at the center of the universe. What exactly did he mean when he said that? Right? Right? What he means is that perhaps the universe is infinite, right? That they were wise enough back then to know. But man is the highest expression of divinity. That's his point. So, right? Inevitably, we arrive at man, right? And he stumbled like pulling roots and out of the earth and eating berries like a monkey for a time, maybe, But inevitably, he did this, right? And he made a handprint on the wall, right? And so, right? At the end of evolution is man. And at the highest level of that expression is the artist, right? The fartist, right? No need to be too serious, right? That an artist is channeling a divinity, right? That they're, right? Ask any great artist. I've heard Prince say it, right? I'm sure Anastasio feels the same way, right? Right? And so, on the highest levels of those artists, right, are the things that are the conditions that we refer to as clairvoyant, right, as psychic, right? Right? So, right? You can do a lot of things if you are a true clairvoyant, right? And Quentin has been a powerful clairvoyant, the most powerful one in Hollywood for a long time. And he espouses it in his novel, right? That Charles Manson talks to Pussycat in this novel, right? The same way Quentin and I talk to each other, right? That Cliff Booth is Brad Pitt and Quentin Tarantino is Charles Manson. Pretty funny, how clever, right? So, when you arrive at this condition of art, right? That you can express your knowing in a myriad of ways, right? That often true clairvoyance emerges as a result of decades of mastery, right? That it's not something that, right? No free lunches, right? So you work on music for 10 years, work on sculpture for 10 years, you work on writing for 10 years, like all of these things, 15 years. Right? But then inevitably, right, like you start tapping into something. Right? And so, right, on the crudest level of that expression is a songwriter, is a writer, right, is a poet, is a painter, etc., etc., etc. Right? All of the arts. Right? Is the good actor, right, the good thespian. Right? Intermediary. Right? Our characters like I want to say Shakespeare, but I suppose he would be in the first category really. But in the second category is characters like Sir Walter Raleigh, who through his genius, his peculiar sort of mastery, right? He was one of the first contemporary chemists, right, in Elizabethan England. Right, that there's documents of the executioner complaining because he spent like 15 years in the Tower of London for a long time. And there's documents of the executioner complaining about how he turned the only garden that the executioner has available into a still, essentially. He talks about his distillations and his liquors, right? But he has at least one documented case, right? And he tried to save King James of healing a guy with really bad gangrene. He got kicked by a horse and he was like on death's door. And so he had this tonic. It's called the Grand Cordial, right? And he gave it to him. All the doctors said, no, he's dead. Like, there's nothing anyone can do, right? And he gave him a massive dose of this tonic and he saved him, right? Broke the gangrene. He kept living, right? This is the intermediary, right? And then on the absolute highest level, right, is a pious, holy person, right? Hovering over a sick person, a diseased person, right? And taking their sickness into them or dissolving it into nothing, right? And so what I find myself in, right, is the other side of that, where far easier, right? You can use your mind to try to destroy people, to try to give them diseases, right? And if you're sick, right, like if you have a diseased wit, right, I cannot give you a wholesome answer. My wit's diseased, right? Then you just don't care, right? And so the folly of that, the folly and fallacy of that logic, right, is that the things that people refer to, right, as clairvoyant, psychic, telepathic, etc., are the same things that people refer to as magic, right? And sorcery, right? The words are different, the tactics are the same, right? It's an expression of intention, right? Which is a behavior like God, like that abstract intellectual quality, right? And so, if you want to do something, right? Say, right, poison someone, right? Then you have to, right? Then that's like a novel neuronal condition that you engender, right? Psychologically, physically, in your brain, right? And then you send it out and it finds its target, but along the way, right, it scans your body and poisons you a little bit thereby. No free lunches, right? Right? And so the real tragedy, right, of like what's occurring, right? Beyond the fact that he's done evil, awful things to me with the destroying angel mushroom and trying to give me AIDS. Like that's all true. Like that's not bullshit, right? It seems egregious, right? Because it is, right? But, right, this is where we're at. But the real tragedy, right, is that Quentin doesn't have an adult daughter, right? That after Tribeca went south, right, that he told me within a few weeks that he had this woman, this adult woman who was in love with me, right, that wanted my baby, etc., etc. And then it was revealed to me, right, that she was his daughter, right? So, again, right, it's a novel, neuronal, psychological, physical condition, right? You're creating a membrane of intention, which is an electrical signal, right? Just like a cell phone tower, right? And so, by the end of it, right, like after I started remote viewing, right, she turned into a nasty bitch who gets paid money to fuck, right? And he poisoned my mind with that for like strong 10 days, right? Constantly. So, like what I'm saying right now, right, is that condition, right, that he made in his mind, right, he sent it out, right, and it went to his little girl, right, and she absorbed the whole thing for sure, 100%. That's how that works. Like both of his kids did, but she's the one that, right, like I don't think it affected his son that much, but it might, you know, in that way. Right? These things that they've been doing, right? They have wreaked havoc on the psyche of their children. 100%. Right? Right? The damage of which only time will tell. Right? And now they're going to question everything forever. Right? If anything ever occurs with her, they have no choice but to say, oh, is this because, right, we were playing fucked up mind games and like letting this guy believe that our daughter was a bitch, right? Who fucks 20 guys a day. Little girl, right? Like she's defenseless. She can't, like, there's boom, it's done. Right? And so now, right, it's the same with me in a big way, right? Again, I can't, like, all they can do is be evil, right? Like, he wanted me to blow my brains out. He knows I'll never do that, right? So, it's really upsetting. It's really upsetting that everyone around him, right? So, I suppose I'm going to go. I'll talk about Fish real quick. Fish played in Birmingham yesterday. It's Monday night right now, right? And so I wrote Fish right before they played their LA shows, right? And I said, oh, can I read my section from my novel where I expose that I'm the reason that the movie critic got canceled during what's going through your mind, right? And so, right, of course, Quentin's hovering over them, right? And so they played the song at the Hollywood Bowl, right? As well as Life Beyond a Dream, right? That's the tough message, you know. I'm trying not to be mad at him, but I'm basically mad at him. And so I didn't go to the shows, and they played What's Going Through Your Mind again, right? As well as What's the Use, right? As well as Twist. If you were here more of the day, it wouldn't twist around that way, right? Oh, just a coincidence, right? So pray for me, right? Pray to bring this to an amicable resolution. There's no hope for us, right? That we're lost, right? That I feel a palpable evil constantly because he just wants me to die. There's nothing I can do, right? That I took a job, like sorting trash, didn't say anything, I had no videos up, right? And he thought that it was funnier to traumatize me every day. So we have to talk about it. There's nothing else but to talk about it, right? And I'm doing my best to move on. You know, I am, right? That this isn't about Quentin, right? But it's included, right? This is about me, about my desire, my intention, right? My love, right? Make your movie, right? If you use my scene, and this is all about my scene for sure, right? You should pay me a fair market value, right? But right, every day that we persist in this way compounds upon the sound logic that he wants me to expire, right? That he's not interested in this persisting for 20 years, right? Until we look each other in the eye, right? He wants me to die, and I suppose I wish he was dead. That's not that I want that, but my life would be easier if him and everyone around him, right? That fine witch he calls a wife, right? And they all meditate on my death constantly. They're weird occultists. They're weird, angry people, right? Who don't appreciate, like, they don't care about the millions of dollars they got, right? They care about the fact that I didn't bend before his will, right? That will is the law, right? I know Aleister Crowley too, right? So, see what's good in your life. Life is not an accident, right? Quentin has his temple to Baphomet. Boom, there it is. Right? I have the temple to God. Right? Right? I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it 1,000 more times. Right? And until we come together, right? Until there's a palpable reconciliation in some way, right? He wants me to die. There's nothing else to think. There's nothing else to think, right? Oh, gosh. Gosh. Right? How unfortunate, right? Just think about it, right? Just really think about it, right? If someone, let's just say that remote viewing is real, and we know it is, right? That if you spend 200 plus hours remote viewing someone, right? 300 plus hours remote viewing them, right? Then you have created a palpable, right, psychological connection with them that you likely will never circumvent, just like your ignorance, right? And so if he has no intentions of reconciling with me, right, then that means that he is accepting, right, that he will have a diseased psychology for the rest of his life, right? That it's a dangerous pathological condition that we're all in. Right? And I can't, like, how else can I express it? Like, what can I say? I've told him 1,000 times, right? That you're insulating an evil pathological condition, right? That I need to physically speak to someone about, and see where we're all standing in this quagmire, right? And he'll always deny. It's obvious he's interested in guile, he's interested in cunning, right? He's interested in lying, right? The Continuing Adventures of Cliff Booth is the movie critic. It's the same movie, right? So, 9601 Wilshire Boulevard, right? William Morris Endeavor, Mike Simpson, right? My heart is with you all. I appreciate everyone who watches these, right? And God willing, we'll resolve it soon. Let me know what you think.